Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Outlander is the Star's entertainment show about Claire Fraser, a 20th century doctor reuniting with her 18th century husband, secret Jacobite Jamie Fraser. They've been separated for 20 years, and Claire has just returned to the 1700s to find him. Unusually for Outlander, this episode starts with a cold open. We see Jamie getting dressed by a French lady who clearly has the glad eyes for him, and after that he heads to his reprint shop, meets up with some bedraggled Jacobites who call him McDo, and has a word or two with his wee assistant, and then he goes and prints a pamphlet. And that's when we come back in where we left off last week, with Claire announcing herself and Jamie straight up fainting onto the floor. Of course, she brings him round, and after a wee bit of shock and surprise, they start to kiss. Oh yeah. Only they get interrupted by the wee puritanical assistant who storms off in a fit of pique. Then after that, Claire and Jamie sit down and talk about the past and each other and about Brianna, and Jamie gets all upset at pictures, and then him in turn turns Claire about Willie, and he shows her the wee painting of him that he keeps. And of course, Jamie has a life and work to do, so they end up wandering out into the streets of Old Reekie, and Claire gets to meet back up with wee Fergus, who isn't so wee anymore. But then they're off to rescue a guy called Mr. Willoughby, and he's a pal of Jamie's, who turns out to be a Chinese guy called Yi Chen Yo, who seems nice enough despite being a bit of a drunk, who apparently likes to lick women's elbows. Okay then. So with that sorted, Jamie pops downstairs to pay off local mafia, and then after that, him and Claire retire to the brothel where the French madam is more than a wee bit upset to meet Jamie's wife. I guess she thought she was in there with a chance. Nope. Then upstairs in Jamie's room, him and Claire try to get a wee bit closer, and they get blocked again by the maid this time. So they have some dinner and a chat, and then when they go for a third try, and he manages to headbutt her by accident. Jamie, what are you doing? Anyway, some serious passionate lovemaking later, and they're in each other's arms reminiscing and chatting between bouts of scandalous lust. It turns out that Jamie's not only a printer, he's now also secretly a smuggler and a writer of illegal political pamphlets, but he's never been caught yet, and if he does, he might get hanged. So the next morning, after a wee bit of breakfast skipping sexy time, Jamie goes off to work, and Claire gets a knock at the door, and it's wee Ian Murray, who's all grown up as well, and he's happy to meet her and makes a joke about her being from the fairies or something, before he heads off again. Cheered up, Claire pops downstairs for some food with the ladies of the night, who assume that she must be some kind of new old girl at the brothel, and they tease her a bit, but generally they're nice enough, only until the madam comes in and starts getting right stroppy about Claire being down in the main room eating with them. But then Claire goes back to her room, and there's a baddie waiting, and he's looking for Jamie's ledgers, and he thinks she's a prostitute. So once she puts him right, he grabs her. Boom! We fade to black. So what did I think? Well, I'm absolutely over the moon that this mini Droughtlander has passed, and that the show is back on. Even a fortnight feels like an eternity without seeing it. But we're back, and this episode was really interesting to me. It managed to set the scene in a slightly new time and place, as well as introducing us to various people and places that are presumably going to be important for the rest of the season, which are all really important things. We also got to see a snippet in the morning of the life of A. Malcolm, and going about his day and doing catching up, as well as all the reacquainting of Jamie and Claire. Now, it's a little thing, but it's kind of important, I feel, that the episode, it didn't really skip over the awkwardness and the difficulty of Claire and Jamie's reunion. It's been 20 years. They don't really know each other, and more than that, Claire, in the when she first went back in time, was like an older, more worldly and wise woman. Jamie wasn't an idiot, but he was still a younger man, and, he was just a groom. Now he's a man in his 40s. He's lived through war, he's lived through prison and lots of other things, and he's a much more cautious and less headstrong person than the young groom that he was in season 1. And he wants to know why Claire's come back, and I think that really helped to sell the kind of slow burn of them both reconnecting and both being just a little bit afraid that something could go wrong, that all this happiness was just about to be snatched away from them. They really sold the idea well, and they reconnected really well. And especially, the scene with them both looking at pictures of the kids was just beautifully done by everyone involved. It was also really interesting that the episode was clearly harking back to the wedding episode of season 1. When they got to the brothel bedroom, it was really obviously supposed to be similar to the room upstairs in the tavern that they went to after they got married. Even the cinematography and the choice of shots seemed to be really harking back to that. It was also really great to see Edinburgh done up in 1760s style. I'm sure a lot of that was probably computer CGI things, but it still looked really amazing to see it. Especially if you've ever been there in real life. It makes a huge change also from Paris and Boston, because it's a very different type of city, and it's more than the rural parts of Scotland that we've seen previously in the castles. But I'm here to be honest, and I have to say there are a few things that I did feel a little bit let down by this week. You see, After a 2 week wait, and after the last episode feeling like it was kind of treading water for the entire runtime, this week kind of felt like it was doing the same thing. I mean, but in a different way. I mean, in some ways, it was a very safe episode, and I also had a really weird sense of deja vu, and not just talking about the bedroom scene. The rest of this episode really reminded me of the first episode of season two, when Jamie and Claire arrived in France. Because in that episode, it felt like they tried to ham fistedly introduce a few characters and locations in rapid succession. But that was just a little bit of that. But this week, that felt like almost the entire episode when they weren't actually in bed together. Now, put it this way, in the space of one episode, we get introduced to the brothel madam, a few of her working girls, like the skinny Puritan printing assistant guy, the grown up versions of Fergus and Ian, Mr. Willoughby, like the weird mafia crime lord guy that Jamie's paying off, and like whoever this guy, the villain of the week, was that turned up at the end. I mean, that's a lot of people to get introduced in one episode, especially when none of them really had an arc or any kind of thing going on in the plot that week. It was just literally like introducing in a who's who. Now, I know it's a new time and new place, but it felt clunky and it was almost like they were just ticking off boxes in a checklist. I mean, it wouldn't maybe have mattered so much if the scenes where Jamie and Claire were like, sitting down, lying down together, talking, or like just sleeping together, wasn't all the else that happened in this episode. And I'm not decrying that. I mean, even the wedding episode had a few scenes that weren't them sleeping together, or romancing up in their room or chatting, but those were all related to that specific plot and to the wedding itself. Like things like the scenes where they made like the ring out of a key. I mean, that was really interesting, and quite funny. Whereas all the stuff in this was just a wee bit clunky. Now, I'm sure all of this will actually probably help out in the long run, and I'm sure a lot of folks, those scenes, they were really just like kind of like a refreshment or maybe an appetizer to the main course, which was Jamie and Claire getting back together again. And let's talk about that. It took them 3 attempts to get to that point. I mean, I know this was kind of like a running gag, and there's a comedy rule of 3 thing where like you should do things 3 times because it's funnier. And I guess maybe it just didn't really land for me. But the whole fact that every time they got up and close and went to, like kiss, they'd get interrupted by someone, and then like the third time he ends up like headbutting her. Now, I got to be honest, I'm not really in the show all just for the sex scenes. They're good if they're well done, but I'm kind of more in for the plot and the intrigue. Now, while this was a really good episode, it just didn't sate me particularly. And I'm kind of glad that we've got Jamie and Claire back together and that they've got like all these sex scenes out the way because and making up for all the lack of them that have been previously. But now hopefully next week we can get right back into Claire and Jamie living their lives and actually having like adventures and things. Because let's be honest, the show's set in the 1700s. We want to see them doing things that aren't just sitting about the house watching telly or the equivalent. But anyway, that's been me. So until next week, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.